In the annals of ancient history, few names shine with the sudden spectacular brilliance of Tigranes II, known to the world simply as Tigranes the Great. He was the architect of the largest Armenian empire ever forged, a short-lived yet magnificent domain that stretched from the Caspian Sea to the Mediterranean. His story is not merely one of royal ascent, but a meticulous case study in how a prince raised as a hostage in a foreign court leveraged geopolitical chaos to become the self-proclaimed King of Kings. Our journey begins not in the royal palaces of Artaxata, but in the sophisticated, politically charged environment of the Parthian court around 112 BC. Tigranes, the scion of the Artaxiad dynasty, was sent to Parthia as a high-value hostage by his own father, King Artavasdes III, following a military defeat or a diplomatic arrangement. This servitude, a forced exile common in ancient politics, was the crucible in which Tigranes was forged. While a hostage, Tigranes was anything but a prisoner. He was educated in the intricate arts of Persian and Hellenistic statecraft. He studied the complexities of the Persian administrative system, observed the vast logistical capabilities of the Parthian military, and mastered the delicate balance of nomadic power. This period was his silent apprenticeship, granting him an unprecedented perspective on the two regional superpowers that would later define his own reign: the expansionist Roman Republic to the west and the powerful Parthian Empire to the east. The true moment of destiny arrived in 95 BC. Tigranes, now in his mid-40s, secured his release from Parthian control. The price for his freedom was the cession of 70 valleys in the region known as Atropatene, or Media Atropatene, a strategic exchange that underscored the desperate state of the Armenian kingdom, but also demonstrated Tigranes' willingness to make temporary sacrifices for ultimate power. Upon his return, he assumed the throne following the death of his father. Tigranes inherited a divided, isolated kingdom. His initial goal was not conquest, but consolidation. The first phase of his reign focused entirely on unifying the disparate regions of the Armenian highlands and eliminating local opposition. His first major foreign action was the swift annexation of Sophene, a neighboring Armenian kingdom ruled by a separate Artaxiad branch. By merging Sophene's territories and resources with Great Armenia, Tigranes solidified his control over the entire Armenian plateau, ensuring the security and unity necessary for his later imperial ambitions. Crucially, in the same period, Tigranes entered into a strategic alliance with Mithridates VI Eupator, the formidable king of Pontus. Tigranes married Mithridates' daughter, Cleopatra of Pontus, cementing a pact designed to check the increasingly ominous expansion of the Roman Republic. This alliance was the cornerstone of their mutual resistance against Rome, and immediately placed Tigranes onto the grand stage of Mediterranean geopolitics. With Armenia secured and a powerful alliance established, Tigranes looked outward, recognizing the immediate power vacuum in the Near East. The once dominant Seleucid Empire, the Hellenistic successor state to Alexander the Great, had collapsed into anarchy, leaving a fragmented tapestry of minor kingdoms and warring principalities. Tigranes, leveraging his acquired knowledge and military training, saw not chaos but opportunity. The time for the King of Kings had arrived. Having consolidated the Armenian highlands and secured a crucial alliance with Pontus, Tigranes the Great began the decade of swift, strategic conquest that would define his legacy. The period between 94 BC and 70 BC marks the absolute zenith of his power, transforming the isolated Armenian kingdom into a major empire rivaling the colossal power of Rome and Parthia. Tigranes' first target was the crumbling Seleucid Empire. The Seleucids, once masters of the Near East, were reduced to warring fragments. In 83 BC, the Syrian nobility, exhausted by constant civil strife, made an unprecedented decision. They offered the crown of the Seleucid Empire to Tigranes. They sought a powerful, stabilizing ruler who could restore order, and Tigranes' recent military successes made him the obvious choice. Tigranes accepted the crown, but not through mere inheritance. He conquered the region and formally annexed it. This annexation was strategic genius. By taking control of Syria and Cilicia, Tigranes acquired vital resources, lucrative trade routes, and, most importantly, control of the vast Seleucid treasury. This acquisition instantly catapulted him into the Hellenistic elite. He became the direct successor to the great empires of the past, claiming dominion over an area that spanned from the Taurus Mountains south to Ptolemaic Egypt. His conquest did not end there. Tigranes moved swiftly south, subjugating the principalities in Cappadocia, which brought him into direct conflict with Roman interests, and pushing east to defeat the Parthians, his former masters, in a series of sharp military engagements. He reclaimed the 70 valleys that he had been forced to surrender for his freedom, and then pushed deep into the Parthian heartland, seizing territories in Mesopotamia. It was following these decisive victories over the Parthians that Tigranes officially adopted the grandiose title, King of Kings, Shahanshah. This title was not a Hellenistic concept. It was a revival of the ancient Achaemenid Persian title, worn by the greatest emperors of Iran. By claiming it, Tigranes was declaring that he was the rightful inheritor of the Median and Persian empires, surpassing even the current Parthian monarch. The Persian Empire, the cradle of ancient world power, had found a new Armenian master to rule this vast multi-ethnic domain, which now included Syrians, Cilicians, Cappadocians, Parthians, and Hebrews. Tigranes recognized the necessity of a new central capital. His old capital, Artaxata, was too far north. He ordered the construction of Tigranocerta, meaning City of Tigranes, in the Mesopotamian plain. Tigranocerta was intended to be the ultimate expression of his power and his fusion of cultures. It was built using forced labor, incorporating aspects of Armenian, Hellenistic, and Persian architecture. Tigranes relocated tens of thousands of people from conquered cities to populate his new metropolis, establishing a truly imperial city designed to be the administrative and commercial hub of his immense empire. Complete with a royal palace, a Hellenistic theater for Greek drama, and massive fortified walls, Tigranocerta quickly became a globally recognized center of wealth, power, and culture, a testament to Tigranes' imperial vision. At its peak, the Armenian Empire of Tigranes the Great encompassed an area stretching from the Euphrates River to the Mediterranean Sea, including parts of modern-day Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq, alongside the vast Armenian highlands. He presided over a golden age of trade and diplomacy. Caravans flowed freely through his lands, paying duties to the Shahanshah, and his word was law across the entire Near East. Yet this rapid and spectacular expansion had a fatal consequence. It pushed the Armenian borders directly against the Roman spheres of influence, particularly in Cappadocia and Cilicia. Tigranes, in supporting his father-in-law Mithridates VI against the advancing Roman legions, was inevitably drawing the attention of the aggressive Republic. The clash between the two powers was no longer a question of if, but when. The stage was set for a confrontation that would either secure Tigranes' imperial dream forever, or lead to the empire's spectacular collapse. Tigranes' imperial ambition, once his greatest strength, ultimately brought him into direct and brutal confrontation with the only power capable of dismantling his empire, the Roman Republic. The clash was inevitable, fueled by Rome's desire to control the wealth of Asia Minor, and Tigranes' unwavering support for his father-in-law, Mithridates VI of Pontus, Rome's most tenacious enemy. Mithridates, after suffering a series of crippling defeats against the Romans, fled to the safety of Armenia in 73 BC, seeking refuge and military aid from Tigranes. Tigranes, honoring their alliance, initially refused to hand over his ally, further infuriating the Roman Senate. This refusal served as the official casus belli. Rome dispatched one of its most brilliant yet politically complex generals, Lucius Licinius Lucullus, to resolve the Mithridatic War by attacking its Armenian backer. Lucullus was a general of extraordinary talent, known for his administrative fairness and strategic insight, though he lacked the popular support of the later figures like Pompey. In 69 BC, Lucullus led his legions across the Euphrates and marched straight into the heart of Tigranes' new domain. This was a bold and risky move, as the Roman army was marching into unfamiliar hostile territory deep within Asia. Tigranes, confident in the sheer size of his empire and his wealth, initially underestimated the Roman threat. His pride had swollen with his empire. He famously remarked that if Lucullus was a general, he would have waited for him in Armenia. But since he was merely a Roman official, he would come no further than Cappadocia. Tigranes' arrogance proved fatal. Lucullus bypassed several fortified positions and laid siege directly to Tigranocerta, the lavish new capital that was still under construction. The King of Kings was forced to confront the Roman force far sooner than he planned. The ensuing battle, fought in 69 BC outside the walls of Tigranocerta, is one of the most stark examples of tactical Roman superiority against overwhelming numbers. Tigranes gathered an immense army, perhaps as large as 80,000 to 100,000 men, composed of heavy cataphract cavalry, infantry drawn from his disparate conquered peoples, and Armenian units. Lucullus commanded a force of only about 12,000 to 15,000 highly trained, professional Roman legionaries. The traditional accounts of the battle paint a picture of catastrophic hubris. Tigranes saw the small size of the Roman force and allegedly declared, "If they are ambassadors, there are too many of them. If they are soldiers, too few." Lucullus, seizing the moment, famously said, "Today is a day of battle, Romans, for good luck is with us." Lucullus used the terrain brilliantly, executing a swift flank attack that targeted the massive but slow Armenian cataphracts. The heavily armored cataphracts, the pride of the Armenian army, were powerful on a frontal charge but became disorganized and vulnerable when attacked from the side and rear by disciplined infantry. The Roman legions broke the cataphract ranks, turning the charge back into the Armenian infantry formation, causing panic and mass disarray. The result was a devastating one-sided rout. Tigranes fled the battlefield, abandoning his entire army, his capital, and his treasury. The Armenian losses were staggering. The fall of Tigranocerta immediately followed. The city's multi-ethnic, recently forcibly relocated population, particularly the Greek and Seleucian citizens, quickly opened the gates to the Romans. Lucullus sacked the immense wealth accumulated by Tigranes. The city was stripped bare, and the massive hoard of gold, silver, and resources was distributed among the Roman troops, earning Lucullus momentary yet immense popularity among his legions. The humiliation of losing his magnificent new capital and the King of Kings title was profound. Tigranes fled north to the safety of his old capital, Artaxata, seeking the counsel of his still defiant ally Mithridates. Despite the catastrophic loss, Tigranes had not lost his army's core strength, and the war was far from over. He had learned a crucial, bitter lesson. Never underestimate the tactical genius and iron discipline of the Roman legions. The next stage of the conflict would see Tigranes adopt a new, more cautious strategy, drawing the Romans deeper into the harsh Armenian mountains. The crushing defeat at Tigranocerta did not shatter Tigranes' resolve. Rather, it shattered his arrogance. The King of Kings finally adopted the strategic advice of his father-in-law, Mithridates VI, who possessed decades of bitter experience fighting Rome. Their new strategy was simple, brutal, and highly effective. Avoid direct confrontation, employ a scorched earth policy, and lure the Roman legions into the rugged, inhospitable terrain of the Armenian highlands. In 68 BC, Lucullus, determined to finish the war, pressed his advantage and marched north toward the old Armenian capital, Artaxata, Artashat. This was a forced march, pushing his troops through the harsh, high-altitude terrain of the Armenian plateau. Tigranes and Mithridates executed their strategy flawlessly, refusing major engagements, burning fields and supplies as they retreated, and using swift cavalry to harass the Roman flanks. Lucullus's army, already stretched thin and far from its supply lines, suffered immensely. The Roman soldiers, accustomed to easy victories and the immediate plunder of cities like Tigranocerta, were exhausted by the endless marching and brutal cold of the Armenian autumn. They grew increasingly mutinous and resentful of Lucullus, whom they viewed as an overly aristocratic general prolonging a fruitless campaign. Despite the growing unrest, the two armies finally met in a major engagement near the river Arsenius, in what is often called the Battle of Artaxata. The Roman sources claim a victory for Lucullus, but it was a Pyrrhic one. The Armenian forces, fighting closer to home and driven by a desperate need to defend their ancient capital, fought with unexpected ferocity. Although the Armenians suffered heavy casualties, the battle failed to deliver the decisive victory Lucullus needed. The severity of the Armenian winter was the true victor. Lucullus's legions flatly refused to continue the march toward Artaxata. The climate, combined with the successful scorched earth tactics of Tigranes, broke the Roman army's morale. Lucullus, facing open rebellion from his own troops, was forced to turn back south, his campaign ending in strategic failure, despite his earlier tactical brilliance. The political fallout in Rome was swift and severe. Lucullus's aristocratic enemies in the Senate seized upon the failure of the Artaxata campaign and the subsequent troop unrest. They accused him of prolonging the war for his own gain and stripped him of his command. Lucullus was recalled to Rome, his incredible conquests effectively nullified by the resistance of the Armenian climate and the political turmoil at home. The retreat of Lucullus provided Tigranes and Mithridates with a critical brief respite. Tigranes immediately counterattacked, sweeping south to reassert control over his lost territories. He systematically expelled the Roman garrisons and began punishing the cities that had sided with Lucullus. For a short time, it appeared the King of Kings was on the path to recovering his former glory. However, Rome would not accept defeat. The Roman Senate, recognizing the existential threat posed by the resilient alliance, decided to deploy their most effective and politically powerful general, Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, Pompey the Great. Pompey was granted imperium, supreme command, and unprecedented authority over the entire East, replacing Lucullus and bringing massive reinforcements. The arrival of Pompey in 66 BC signaled the final, inevitable end of the Armenian Pontic resistance. Pompey was not only a superior commander, but possessed the political clout to ensure the unwavering loyalty of his troops. The war had escalated from a regional conflict into Rome's primary imperial objective. Tigranes now faced not a brilliant but troubled general, but the full unified military and political might of the Roman Republic. The arrival of Pompey the Great fundamentally changed the geopolitical calculus for Tigranes. Pompey, renowned for his efficiency and massive armies, immediately crushed Mithridates, forcing the king of Pontus to flee to Crimea, where he would later meet his death. Suddenly isolated and facing the full unified power of Rome, Tigranes knew that continued military resistance would lead not just to defeat, but to the total obliteration of his dynasty. Tigranes' decision to surrender was not an act of cowardice, but a strategic masterstroke of self-preservation. In 66 BC, the aging King of Kings executed a profoundly calculated diplomatic move. He rode into the Roman camp, not as a defiant enemy, but as a humbled monarch. According to the Roman historian Plutarch, Tigranes removed his diadem, laid it at the feet of Pompey, and surrendered his person and his empire to the Roman general's mercy. Pompey, a pragmatic statesman as much as a general, was hugely impressed by this gesture of submission. He chose not to annex Armenia outright, but to maintain Tigranes as a client king. The Roman Republic gained an immensely valuable buffer state against the Parthian Empire and secured the immense prestige of having conquered the King of Kings. The terms of the settlement were harsh but ensured the survival of the Armenian state. Tigranes was forced to pay a massive war indemnity of 6,000 talents, and he was stripped of all his imperial conquests: Syria, Cilicia, Cappadocia, and Sophene. However, he was confirmed as the legitimate ruler of Great Armenia and granted the title ally and friend of the Roman people. Crucially, his dynasty remained intact. This final act of humility secured Tigranes a peaceful, if diminished, end to his long reign. He governed his core kingdom of Armenia for another 10 years, until his death in 55 BC. He left the throne to his son Artavasdes II, ensuring the continuity of the Artaxiad line, a feat no other major foe of Rome in the east, including Mithridates, Jugurtha, or Vercingetorix, managed to achieve. The legacy of Tigranes. The great Tigranes' legacy remains multifaceted. For the Armenian nation, he is remembered as the greatest conqueror in their history, the man who briefly expanded Armenia's borders to their widest extent, creating a regional superpower. His reign remains the golden age of political and territorial achievement, a profound source of national pride. His life encapsulates the ultimate tragedy of unchecked ambition in the ancient world. He transformed from a shrewd, calculating prince into an overconfident imperial power, whose arrogance allowed a small Roman force to cripple his vast army at Tigranocerta. Yet his final pragmatic submission to Pompey demonstrated his ultimate political wisdom. He chose the survival of the state over his own pride. The empire built by Tigranes the Great was ephemeral, lasting barely 2 decades. Yet its foundation was so strong that Armenia remained a crucial pivot point between Rome and Parthia, and later the Sassanids and Byzantium, for centuries. Tigranes did not conquer the world, but by challenging the emerging Roman global order, he carved out a permanent, influential place for the Armenian kingdom on the world stage. His name, inscribed in the annals of both Armenia and Rome, forever stands as a monumental symbol of national power, political acumen, and the timeless collision between Eastern might and Western ambition.